All right, so as I said, welcome to the FAFSA filing webinar. I'm going to kind of go over what to do when filing a FAFSA, what it means, timelines that are needed. So here are some of the topics that I'm going to be reviewing this evening. It'll be financial aid programs, how and when you can apply, actually filing the FAFSA. I'll have some screenshots, some helpful frequently asked questions, tips and resources, and then at the end I can address some of your questions that are in the Q&A box. But like I said, my colleague Katie will be answering them while I present, and anything that she thinks I can answer live, she'll tag it and I'll get it to it at the end. So first I'm going to start off with what is financial aid. So we typically break financial aid up into three categories. Those categories are grants and scholarships, which is known as gift aid. This is aid that does not need to be paid back. Next would be federal work study, and then we have our federal loans. So the federal work study and loans is something that you can get by filing your FAFSA. You can get federal grants as well from the FAFSA. Scholarships do typically come from the institution themselves. So first we have federal work study. So the eligibility for federal work study is determined through the FAFSA. Most of these jobs are worked on campus and hours are based on the student's schedule, so it's pretty flexible. Students will earn these wages. So when you get your financial aid package and you see federal work study, please note that these funds will not be directly applied to a student's billing. This they would get in the form of a paycheck should they elect to do federal work study. These jobs are typically part-time, or they could also be classified as undergrad assistantships. So by participating in federal work study, students can earn more than just a degree. They can get valuable networking opportunities, start building their resume, and it's a great way to meet faculty and students on campus. If your student is not eligible for federal work study, most campuses do have non-federal work study positions. So that's definitely something that you can inquire. So if you're not eligible, it's okay. There are definitely on-campus jobs that are non-federal work study as well. Next, we have gift aid. So gift aid is comprised into scholarships and grants. So firstly, scholarships can typically be awarded by the institution or from an outside party. Institutional scholarships, depending on the university, some institutions will automatically consider the student for a scholarship as soon as they apply. Other schools might have a separate application, so it's important to check with admissions to see how their awarding model goes. Outside scholarships can come from any outside organization, such as, if the student's involved in Key Club and they get a Key Club scholarship, or even some of your employers might have a scholarship program they can apply for. Those can also be counted. So if you are awarded any outside scholarships, please let the institution that you'll be attending know, so that way they can let you know how you can go about getting that applied. Then we have grants, which are also gift aid. So these can also be offered through the institution. And then there are two federal grants you could be eligible for. These federal grants go by filing your FAFSA and what eligibility that comes out of that. So there is something called the Federal Pell Grant and the Federal Supplemental Opportunity Grant, or also known as SEOG. So again, those go by filing your FAFSA. Then for New York State residents, there's also a New York State grant called the Tuition Assistance Program, or also known as TAP. So this is separate from filing your FAFSA. In order to be eligible for TAP, you have to be a New York State resident and have lived in New York State prior 12 months. And you would need to file your FAFSA first, and then you can go ahead and file your TAP application. So I'll go a little bit more into that in the next couple slides. This is a great screen if you want to take a screenshot or a picture with your phone of some outside scholarship search sites. So finaid.org. That's great for looking at different scholarships, and it also goes through loans, whether they're federal or private. So there's some really great information through there. Students can also use fastweb.com and scholarships.com. These you can typically filter to see what your student does. If they're in any extracurriculars or sports or in any activities, they can typically filter and apply for the scholarships. Typically, the rule of thumb is if there's a lot of work involved in the scholarship, less people apply, so the more of a chance you have to get the scholarship. So it's definitely something that I highly recommend. And lastly, we have federal loans. So here I have the loan rates that are for the current academic year, which will be 2020-2021. The next academic year, 2021-2022, those rates are typically available as of July 1st. So we have first is the federal subsidized and or unsubsidized loans. These are also known as Stafford loans. So these loans you are eligible for by filing the FAFSA. These would be entirely in the student's name, so the student is the borrower. You can be eligible for subsidized loans or unsubsidized or a combination of both. That goes by your expected family contribution or EFC. So the subsidized loan does not accrue any interest while you're in school, and the unsubsidized loan does accrue interest while you're in school. However, neither loans need to be paid back until after you graduate. And there is a 6-month grace period after the student graduates before any repayment needs to be made with the loan lender. Right now, the current interest rate for students is 2.75%. This went down from the last academic year, which was 4.53%. So it did drastically go down from the previous academic year. And something to remember, the student loans do have a small origination fee that comes off of the top. It's typically about $20. So you would say if the student gets $2,000, about $990 would disperse per semester, so about $10 off each loan. The amount that the student is eligible for is based on their year in college. So freshmen are typically eligible for a combination of sub and unsub loans of about $5,500 per year. Sophomores get $6,500 per year, and then juniors and seniors get $7,500 per year. So another federal loan that I'm going to talk about today is the Federal Parent Plus loan. So this loan, the FAFSA does need to be on file for, and this loan would be in the parent's name. This would not be in the student's name. So the parent borrower would be borrowing this on behalf of the student. This has a fixed interest rate right now of 5.3%, which went down from the previous academic year, which was 7.6%. This also has an origination fee, so this would be something you'd have to look out for. So whatever you're applying for, make sure you apply for a little bit extra than what the actual balance is. The other loans would be an alternative or personal student loan. These would be any private loans that you may apply for. Please remember that the rates on these are variable, and they do have different terms, so it's important to read through them and really look at different loan lenders to see which one's the right one for you. And then some people do choose to go with a home equity loan as well. So here we have our financial aid timeline for the 2021-2022 academic year. So this is for seniors. So this is September through December of your senior year in high school. So one student and one parent and a student would apply for their FSA ID. So this is something you can go ahead and do now. You would do so at studentaid.gov/FSA ID. This is required in order to file the FAFSA. Again, it's just the student and only one parent in the household. As of October 1st, you'll be able to apply for the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, at studentaid.gov. For New York State residents, the TAP application will also be available as of October 1st. You'd be able to apply for the TAP application at hesc.ny.gov. Please keep in mind that you would need to file the FAFSA first before filing the TAP application. Once you complete the FAFSA, if you take a look before or after the confirmation page, it'll say, would you like to file a TAP application? It can take you right to the TAP application right from there. If you do forget that step, it is okay. You can go right to hesc.ny.gov and complete the application. Some colleges also require the CSS profile, the College Scholarship Service. Not all schools require this, so again, I would definitely check with the admissions counselors of the institutions that you're applying for to see if this is something that you would need to fill out. For instance, Hofstra does not require the CSS profile, but again, that'll be available as of October 1st. And this can also be the time when you start applying for outside scholarships as well. So then we get to January through March. So we recommend that your FAFSA is filed by February 1st at the latest. Colleges and universities will be beginning to send out their financial aid award notifications. FAFSA filing deadlines and timing of these award notifications will vary. So if your FAFSA is not in, you might get your financial aid package a little bit later. You may also need to complete verification, which I'll be going over in a later slide, only if it's required. And you may need to hand in any other requested documents, such as proof of citizenship, selective service, and then once they graduate, they might need their high school diploma for the TAP application. And then we get into the home stretch, which is April through May. This is when you'll begin to pay your tuition and housing deposits and begin to accept or decline any financial aid. And after May, you would begin to complete your loan applications and any additional requirements. So who is eligible for federal aid? So US citizens and eligible non-citizens, such as permanent residents, are eligible to file the FAFSA and receive federal aid. Males between the ages of 18 and 25 must register with the Selective Service at www.sss.gov. If your student is 17 and cannot file for Selective Service, there's actually an option on the FAFSA where you can have them auto-registered once they turn 18. So look for that on the FAFSA if you don't want to have to manually register when they turn 18. So that way it automatically does it for you. Students must have a valid Social Security number. If a parent does not have a Social Security number, you would then enter all zeros on the FAFSA for that parent. Deferred action or DACA students are not eligible to file a FAFSA and would not be eligible for any federal aid, but they can still be eligible for institutional aid. So why do we file the FAFSA? So first off, it is free. It determines the eligibility for federal grants, loans, and work study. Some states, including New York, require it as the first part of an application process for the financial aid from that state. So as I mentioned previously, you would need to file your FAFSA before you file your New York State TAP application. And some colleges and private organizations require it for consideration of any other additional scholarships or grants. So what will you need to file the FAFSA? Collect the documents needed for both students and parents. So the FAFSA goes off the prior tax year. So for the 2021-2022 year, all sources of 2019 taxed and untaxed income, such as income tax returns, W-2 forms, benefit statements, etc., would be needed. There's also the IRS data retrieval tool that's available to simplify the process, and I do have a screen that I will be going over that as well. You would also need asset information such as your most recent bank statements, investments, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, social security numbers, the student's driver's license if it's applicable, along with any alien registration numbers if it's applicable. So a frequently asked question, can a student choose to report 2020 information? So when you're filing the FAFSA, you must actually report the year that the FAFSA is asking for. So you would need to report the 2019 information. So remember, certain items on the FAFSA are as of today, so you must read each question and fill out accordingly. And if questions are answered incorrectly, your FAFSA may be selected for a process called verification. So what if my family's financial situation has changed since 2020, which is the year that you would be filing the FAFSA. We recommend that you speak with colleges you're accepted to and add them to your FAFSA because each school will handle these situations differently. Most colleges have a special form or process called a reevaluation where they can reevaluate your federal aid if it has changed drastically from 2019. So this is what the homepage would look like for the FAFSA. So you would start a new FAFSA, or if you're a returning user and have another student in college, the parent would be the returning user. So the student would log in with their FSA ID. If you don't remember the FSA ID, you can enter the student's information. So a great question. I can only send the FAFSA to 10 colleges online. What if I need to send the FAFSA to more? You can change the codes by going back into the FAFSA online or call 1-800-4FED-AID and do it over the phone. By doing this, you are actually removing some of the previous schools listed, and therefore future changes to the FAFSA will only be sent to the new schools listed. So make sure that if you do make changes and you're sending it to multiple schools, that you send the FAFSA to all of those schools to delete and re-add. So this is a great question. It kind of goes over what I was going over in the previous slide. So let's say, a parent retired and the household income has changed from 2019. How can that be reflected on the FAFSA if the 2020 income is not used? So again, you would still need to file the FAFSA with the year that it's asking for. So for instance, it would be asking for your 2019 semester. 2019 year semester, huh? So then after your FAFSA is filed and your federal aid package has been completed, you can then go to that school and ask for a reevaluation of income and provide your 2020 information. And from there, the school can determine if you would be eligible for any additional grants from the FAFSA. So who is considered a parent? So on the FAFSA, a legal parent would include a biological or adoptive parent or a person that the state has determined to be your parent. For example, when a state allows another person's name to be listed as a parent on the birth certificate, so grandparents, foster parents, legal guardians, older brothers and sisters, widowed step parents, aunts and uncles are not considered parents unless they have legally adopted you. And if you want to take a little picture of the box, it's just how to provide information for marital statuses. So it's definitely something I would recommend. If your parents are unmarried but both living together, you would be required to put both of their incomes on the FAFSA. Married is both incomes. Remarried after being divorced or widowed, you would have the parent and step parent. So definitely an important chart to keep for your records. So my parents are separated or divorced and living apart. Whose information do I put on the FAFSA? You should report the information for the parent who you lived with the most over the past 12 months, regardless of who claims you on their income tax. So let's say the student is basically equally between you, 50-50. You would then go by who has more financial responsibility for the student, who would be the one to file the FAFSA. Do parents have to be legally separated to file the FAFSA as separated? No. So colleges may ask for a proof of residences, separate residences, such as copy of a lease and utility bills, just to prove that you are in fact separated. My step parent is not responsible for supporting me, so why do I have to report his or her income on the FAFSA? So if the parent you reside with is remarried, per federal regulations, you're required to report your step parent's information on the FAFSA. So this is what the IRS data retrieval tool will look like when you're getting ready to do the income sections. It'll ask for you to go to the IRS data retrieval tool, you'll see the red box. That field will be pre-populated based on the income information, based on the information you've already submitted. And then you would input your current address, state, zip code, etc., and press submit. And that would bring you to your tax information. So it's very important where you see the bottom circle where it says transfer now, make sure you check off to transfer your tax information to the FAFSA. If you accidentally click off do not transfer, it's okay, but it's going to have you manually fill everything in. So just make sure that you press transfer my information to the FAFSA and then transfer now. So we always get a lot of questions of what assets are. So an asset is net worth. That means current value of the assets minus what is owed. So an asset would include money and cash savings and checking accounts, businesses, investment farms, other investments such as real estate other than the home in which you live in, UGMA and UTMA accounts for which you are the owner, stocks, bonds, and certificates of deposit. Assets do not include the home in which you live. We find that's one of the most common errors. Parents will put their home in which they live as an asset. You do not need to do that on the FAFSA. UGMA and UTMA accounts for which you are the custodian but not the owner. The value of life insurance, as well as retirement plans, 401k plans, pension funds, annuities, non-educational IRAs, or KEO plans. So how are 529 plans reported on the FAFSA? A 529 plan is reported under the owner as an investment, not the beneficiary. If the parent is the owner, it is reported under the parent investment question. If the parent has more than one 529 savings plan for various members of the family, including siblings of the student, the total value of all plans must be reported under the parent. And then we get to the student signature page. So this is a very important page. Please make sure that you sign the FAFSA before it's submitted. You would make sure the information is correct and then click I agree and the small button that says sign at the bottom. And then the parents will have a similar signature page. It's very important that both are submitted. So you would check to make sure your information is correct. You would agree, and then you would press submit my FAFSA now. Then you would get this confirmation page that says, congratulations, your FAFSA was submitted. It would also list the schools that you've listed on the FAFSA. So as long as you get this confirmation page with the schools listed, if you're looking to add 10 more, you can then delete those schools and add a list of new schools. So we highly recommend that you keep these confirmation pages. I've also boxed in some very important information here. For instance, if you have a brother or sister that needs to complete the FAFSA, if so, it'll show that you can transfer your parents' information onto a new FAFSA for the brother or sister. That will save any type of time that you might have. It also tells you what happens next. You'll receive an email version of this page, which will then be sent to the school. You'll also get your expected family contribution, or EFC, right at the bottom, which will let you know what your EFC is. Please remember that your EFC is not how much aid you will receive or how much money you are expected to pay for college. It's more of an indicator of where you would fall and how you would be packaged for aid. So what would happen next? After your FAFSA is processed, you will receive a student aid report with an estimated eligibility. This report will include your EFC, or expected family contribution. Each school listed on your FAFSA will receive the information you submitted. If accepted for college, the college or colleges will calculate and prepare a financial aid package. Further details regarding your awards and other required documents will be provided within the aid package. And then you'd be able to accept or decline the aid offered and return to the office as early as possible. So I do have a great question here that I'm going to answer live regarding 529 plans. So what if a grandparent owns the 529? If the grandparent is the owner of the 529 plan, you would not need to report it. You only report 529 plans under the owner. So if it is the parent that's filling out the FAFSAs or in the household, you would list it under their assets, or if it's the student. But if it is the grandparent, it's technically not owned by the parent or student, so it would not need to be listed. So this is a great chart if you want to take a little screenshot. It highlights basically the timeline that I was giving for the financial aid process, along with some really great helpful websites to use. For instance, the fall semester, so you can start the student and the parent can start applying for their FSA IDs. You can begin to inquire about scholarships and grants at colleges, register for selective service if the student's 18. Then October 1st, you would go ahead and file your FAFSAs or your CSS profiles, as well as the TAP application. And it has the timeline going through October through May, as I've highlighted before. So a really great picture. I'll kind of pause for a second if you want to take a little screenshot, and then I'll move on to the next slide. So before I had mentioned verification. So what is verification? Your student aid report will notify you if you have been selected by the FAFSA processor, and the colleges you apply to will also be notified. So what you would need to do to rectify verification, you would need to submit signed 2019 income documentation. This could be a signed 2019 tax return. They typically just need the 1040 portion. Schools may also have their own internal worksheet that you would need to provide as well. You can also request copies of the 2019 federal tax return transcripts in advance. Please don't miss out on this opportunity. Additional aid can be offered upon completion of verification, but also keep in mind that your aid may be adjusted based on these corrections. If verification is not completed, then the student would not be able to use federal aid for the academic year. So it's very important that you get in the documents prior to starting at the college. So a FAFSA tip: should I hire a consultant to help me file the FAFSA? We don't recommend paying a fee when you can get the help you need right from the source and for free. Specialized FAFSA representatives are available to assist you step by step through the application process at 1-800-4FED-AID or 1-800-433-3243. You can also click the Live Help button to chat with a FAFSA representative, which is really helpful. Instead of going on the phone, they'll be able to chat with you and get you through the application with any parts that you need help with. So some FAFSA tips. What are some common mistakes that students and families make when completing the FAFSA? Not asking for help when it's needed. So please call or utilize the FAFSA chat anytime that you need help or need a question. There's also self-service buttons throughout the FAFSA where you can click on a little info button and it'll tell you what's needed. Please make sure that you file the correct FAFSA for the correct aid year. So when you're going in on October 1st to fill out your FAFSA, the FAFSA for the current academic year of 2020-2021 will be up there, as well as the 2021-2022. So make sure you're filling out the 2021-2022 FAFSA. Do not use any nicknames. Use the name as spelled on the Social Security card. Use correct Social Security numbers and dates of birth. Just make sure they're typed in correctly. It's a very common mistake for a number to be reversed, so just make sure that it is correct. Do not list parent income information under the student section. Sometimes if you're trying to complete it really quickly, it copies over, so make sure that you do not list it so that way it doesn't show double income. Make sure both the student and parent signatures go through. And if your address has changed, please update your admissions application. Your FAFSA can go into what we call a suspended status if your address does not match up with what it is on the FAFSA. We can correct this at the school level, but it's easier to get it rectified prior. So these are some helpful links and resources for financial aid. I've listed our website there. We do have some webinars as well regarding filing your FAFSA if you wanted to take a look. For federal information, you can use studentaid.ed.gov. For New York State aid or TAP, it would be hesc.ny.gov. And for great general information, finaid.org is great for looking up outside scholarship applications as well as researching different loan lenders. So that's a really great website. So now I can take some of your questions. I know some of you have been typing them in through the Q&A. So now's your time to ask any additional questions, or if you need me to go back to a slide, please let me know so that way I can do that and put that up if you need it. So somebody's asking if we have a copy of the slideshow. I'm currently going to record it and I'll email the recording over to Dan. So he should be able to email it out to the attendees. So don't worry, we will get you a copy.
Teresa, a question that we've gotten in the past is whether early decision impacts financial aid.
Mhm. That's a great question. So early decision, it depends on the school that you go to. Not all schools participate in early decision. Some schools might just do early action. Early decision, you would need to get your FAFSA in on time. Some schools do kind of first come, first serve with early decision. So if you are going that route, I would highly suggest that you're in contact with the admissions counselors. So that way you have all of your FAFSA documentation, TAP documentation, and scholarships in, because it could affect it. At Hofstra, for instance, it's just your application. We don't have early decision, it's only early action and enrolling. So if you have your FAFSA in, at any time, we'll be able to package you with federal aid, and your student will be able to get considered for a scholarship once they apply. There's no separate applications. So that's definitely something to check with as well. If the institutions that you're applying to require separate applications for for scholarships, it's very important to ask them to see what that process would be. All right, let's see. So let's see. A current high school senior that will enter college in fall 2021 is filing the FAFSA labeled for the years. Okay, yes. So if you're a senior right now and you're applying to go into college, you're looking at filing the 2021-2022 FAFSA application. So that would be, again, 2021 to 2022. Let's see. Uh, let's see. So if somebody, let's say, files joint taxes, but the other parent, one parent works and one parent doesn't, can you still be the parent on the applications? Yes. It only requires one FSA ID per household. So if it's two parents together, only one of you needs an FSA ID, and you would report your information. If that's zero, you would put zero, and then you would also report your partner's information. So if they're making income, you would put that on there. So that way you're accounting for both in the household. So let's see, another question. So if a parent is remarried, and the current step parent isn't like adopted, how does that sort of work? So even if they're not adopted by the step parent, if you're living in the household together, you would still be required to file and include the step parent's information per federal regulations. Oh, I get this question frequently. I know it's not FAFSA related, but I guess test optional related. So a lot of schools right now, I know Hofstra for one, we've been doing test optional for a couple of years, but test optional, they would really be looking at more of a holistic approach. So they'll be looking at the student's GPA as a whole. So I would also begin asking those questions to any admissions teams for schools that you're applying to if they are test optional or electing to be test optional. So it definitely doesn't hurt your students' chances by any means. They're just going to look at everything as a whole. A great question. So, what is the CSS application? So, this is a college application. It's a little bit more in depth than the FAFSA. Typically, there is a fee when you file the CSS profile, and not every school requires it. So, it's important to ask if that's something they require. That's usually for institutional aid. So, sometimes it's additional scholarships that are need based. That's what the CSS profile is for. Okay, this is a great question. So, does the FAFSA allow for any special accommodations for those who are self employed, owners of businesses that have incomes that vary from year to year? So, yes, you would still be required to file the 2019 income information that it's asking for. However, if 2020, obviously, if you haven't been making as much or your income has drastically changed, you can reach out to your financial aid offices for the colleges that you've applied to after you get your financial aid package, and they can do something called a reevaluation of special circumstances. They'll ask you to apply to supply documentation such as most recent pay stubs, W-2s for 2020 if you have them, and things like that, so that way they can take a look and see if it will change your federal aid in any way. So being concerned with identity theft, is this information going to colleges secure? It's very secure. The FAFSA only shares the information with the schools, and I haven't heard of anything being breached. So it's very secure. It doesn't share your information with anything other than the schools. And they're really just looking at the information for financial aid packages. So it's very secure. Great question. Since the FAFSA for 2021, 2022 can be filed as of October 1st. Let's see. Um, so it relies on the 2019 tax data. Yes, they do the prior year, I guess just to make sure everybody's taxes are in for that year. But again, if any special circumstances occur, please let the school know because they can work with you and see how it can be possibly adjusted. Okay, so here's a great question. So basically if it's a divorce situation and they're responsible for 60% of paying for college and you're responsible for a different percentage, can you apply for aid without any of his income input? So if you're divorced, not living in the same household, the student only needs one FSA ID. So it's primarily from the parent that they live most with over the past 12 months. So if they're living equally, then you would put who is more financially responsible. If you're more financially responsible, then you can file the FAFSA. It is self-reporting, so you can really, it's up to you and your ex who you would want to put on the FAFSA, but you would just need one FSA ID. And if you're divorced, you would only be putting your income information if it's your FSA ID. Any other questions? I know you might be typing, so don't rush.
All right, Teresa, I just wanted to thank you for doing this. Again, wonderful presentation, so much good information. As Teresa said, she'll share the video with me,
Mhm.
and I can send that out once received. So thank you, Teresa.
Thank you.
Oh, I think we have another question.
Oh, thank you very much. It was informative. I appreciate it.
And again, for anybody who jumped on late, we are having a senior parent college night next Tuesday. Myself, Mr. Contreras, our new principal, are going to present on how to apply to college applications, what this year looks like in terms of COVID, feedback we've heard from admissions counselors. So hopefully that's as informative as this one was.
Thank you. Yeah, and I know just to address, with COVID, I know especially incomes have changed significantly. So I know you have to report your 2019 income, but again, if your income has changed drastically, please reach out to whatever colleges that you're applying to. You wouldn't be able to apply for a special circumstance until after you've been packaged, but you can absolutely do so, and colleges will work with you. You would just need to supply additional information. So definitely don't hesitate to reach out and ask questions. Colleges do want to work with you and work with your student to get them the most aid that they can get.
All right. Thank you so much, Teresa. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.